So you're thinking about picking up a guitar. Huh. It's a pretty cool feeling, isn't it? That moment you're like, all right, let's do this. I want to learn how to play. And, it's a great instrument to choose. So much history, so many possibilities. And these days, learning on your own, it's easier than ever. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Yeah, there's just so much information out there. So what we're doing in this deep dive, we're trying to cut through all the noise and really give you the practical stuff. No information overload, just the core knowledge so you can actually start this journey. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's not like you need a ton of fancy equipment, right? The guitar is relatively affordable. You can take it anywhere, and your practice space, well, it can be anywhere, really. Yeah. So from what we've seen in the research, what's the best way to learn guitar by yourself in 2025?
Well, pretty much everyone agrees online guitar lessons have really changed the game, right? Like the old ways, like just having a teacher in person or using those old method books, those can still be helpful. But for most people starting out today, especially if you're teaching yourself, they're just not as efficient. I mean, think about it. Now you can get high quality instruction from anywhere in the world, anytime you want, and often for a lot less money. That's a huge shift in music education.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But what is it about online lessons that make them work so well for someone who's just starting out, picking up a guitar for the first time and trying to figure things out on their own?
Well, there are a few things. First, let's talk about cost. I mean, a lot of online resources, they offer free content to get you started. And even if you go for a more comprehensive program, something with more structure, it's still usually pretty affordable, often just a small monthly fee. And then there's the accessibility, right? You can access these lessons 24/7 from basically any device with an internet connection, your computer, your tablet, even your phone. And of course, it's super convenient. No need to schedule lessons or travel anywhere. You can learn on your own time, at your own pace.
Oh, definitely. And that's a big deal for a lot of people these days, especially if you're busy, right? Plus, I'd imagine that with online lessons, you're getting something that's been carefully put together, edited and everything to make sure it's high quality.
Yeah, exactly. The top platforms really put a lot of effort into making their lessons high quality. But, before we get too carried away, we do need to be realistic about this whole thing. Learning guitar, it takes time. It's a journey. You're not going to become a rock star overnight.
For sure. It takes dedication, got to be patient, and more than anything else, you've got to practice consistently. But it's also supposed to be fun, right? Learning guitar should be a journey of discovery, not just a chore.
Definitely. It's all about enjoying the process of learning and making music. So let's break down those essential steps to get you started on your own guitar learning adventure. And the first thing we need to talk about is getting a guitar, right? The instrument itself.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one. Acoustic or electric? What kind of guitar should a beginner even be looking for?
Well, there's some really interesting advice in the sources we've looked at. One of the things that stood out to me is choose a guitar that you actually like to look at. This isn't just about, how cool it looks. It's more than that. Studies actually show that when we feel good about our tools, when we have a positive connection with them, we're more likely to use them, we're more motivated. So think of it this way. You're setting yourself up for a better practice experience. And in the beginning, whether you go for acoustic or electric, it's not the most important thing. What matters most is getting comfortable with the basics.
That's actually really good to know. Take some of the pressure off, because buying guitar can be a big decision, especially for someone just starting out. But what if you're not ready to commit to buying one just yet? Any other options?
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of sources suggest maybe trying to borrow a guitar first. See if you can get your hands on one from a friend, family member, maybe. That way you can really get a feel for it, see if it's something you're going to stick with before you spend the money on your own. And believe it or not, some music stores even offer rentals, and surprisingly, some libraries do too. Now, if you're thinking about buying a used guitar, those can be a great value, but it's always a good idea to have someone who knows about guitars take a look at it first, just to make sure it's in good condition.
Okay, that's really smart advice. Now, what if someone decides to just go ahead and buy a new guitar? What should they be looking for, especially if they're a beginner?
The most important thing is to get a guitar that's easy to play, one that feels comfortable in your hands. Don't be shy about asking for a demo at the store, or if you know someone who plays guitar, bring them along to try it out. If you're buying online, check if they offer a basic setup with the purchase. A basic setup is where they adjust things like the height of the strings and the neck to make it easier to press down on the strings. That's really helpful, especially when you're starting out and your fingers aren't used to it.
So there are a ton of different types of guitars out there, right? You've got Acoustic flat tops, classical guitars, electric guitars, solid body, thin body, and then there are different types of strings, steel strings, nylon strings. Does any of that really matter when you're first starting out?
Yeah, you're right. There's a whole world of guitars out there. But honestly, in those very first steps of learning, the specific type you choose isn't going to make or break your progress. I will say, though, most of the sources we looked at, they tend to focus on either steel string acoustics or electric guitars, especially for the styles of music that a lot of beginners are drawn to: rock, blues, country, folk, that kind of thing. And it's worth mentioning that classical guitars, those use nylon strings, which some people say are a little easier on your fingertips when you're starting out just because they're not as hard as steel. So that's something to consider too, just in terms of comfort. But overall, I think the reason those two-string acoustics and electric guitars are so popular for beginners is because they can be used to play such a wide range of music.
Okay, cool. So you've got your guitar. Now what? You need a place to practice,
Right.
right? And it sounds like setting up the right environment can make a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it as creating a space that invites you to play, a place where you feel comfortable and inspired. One really simple but super effective tip is to keep your guitar out in the open. Put it on a stand in your living room or somewhere you see it all the time. It's a visual reminder to pick it up and play. It's like that saying, out of sight, out of mind. If you keep your guitar tucked away in a case, you're less likely to play it.
That's so true. What else can you do to make your practice space more conducive to learning?
Well, comfort is key, right? Make sure the temperature is good, not too hot, not too cold. And good lighting is important too, so you can see the fretboard clearly. Invest in a comfortable chair or stool, something without arms, because you don't want anything restricting your movement when you're strumming. And, having good posture is surprisingly important. It can really affect how you play and how comfortable you feel. And lastly, if you can, find a quiet spot where you're not going to be interrupted too much.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your guitar, you've got your space all set up, but before you can really make music, you need to make sure your guitar is in tune. That was always a bit intimidating for me when I was starting out.
Oh, I get that. A lot of people feel that way, but trust me, it's absolutely essential. Playing an out-of-tune guitar is not only going to sound bad, but it can also mess with your ear, make it harder to learn how things are supposed to sound. Now, the six strings on a guitar, from the thickest to the thinnest, they're named E, A, D, G, B, and then the high E. And there are these little sayings that can help you remember the order, like eat a donut, get big easy, or every adult dog growls, bites, eats.
Those are pretty good. I have
Yeah.
to remember those. So how do you actually go about tuning a guitar?
Well, especially for beginners, almost everyone recommends using an electronic tuner. They're really affordable these days, and they're super accurate. You can also use a tuning fork or a tuning pipe, but those can be a little trickier to use, especially when you're first starting out. Electronic tuners are just much easier. We'll make sure to include a link to a video showing you how to use one in our resources.
Awesome, thanks for that. Now, just a quick question. How do you know which way to turn those little tuning pegs on the headstock of the guitar?
Okay, so generally, if you turn the tuning peg counterclockwise, that's going to tighten the string and make the pitch go up or sharper. And if you turn it clockwise, that's going to loosen the string and make the pitch go down or flatter. It takes a bit of practice to get a feel for how much to turn them, but you'll get it. Basically, what you're doing is adjusting the tension on the strings. And the tighter the string, the faster it vibrates, and that's what makes the pitch higher.
Okay, so now we've got the guitar in tune. We're sitting in our comfy practice space. Now what? How do we actually hold this thing and make a sound, especially if you're using a pick?
All right, so posture is really important here. You want to be comfortable, and you want to develop good habits right from the start. There are a bunch of videos online that show you how to hold a guitar correctly, both sitting and standing. And if you're using a pick, the way you hold it between your thumb and index finger can make a big difference in how it sounds. Also, different pick thicknesses will give you different tones, but a medium thickness is a good place to start.
And what about your other hand, the one you use to press down on the strings?
That's called fretting, because you're pressing down on the strings against the frets, which are those metal strips on the neck of the guitar. The best way to do this is to use your fingertips and press down just behind the fret, not directly on top of it or too far behind. Pressing behind the fret gives you the clearest sound.
Got it. All right, we've covered the basics, how to hold the guitar, how to tune it. Now comes the fun part, actually learning to play. With all the online options out there, where do you even start?
This is where a lot of people get tripped up. There's just so much information out there, and it's tempting to just jump around, try a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But honestly, the best advice I can give you is to choose one online lesson program that's well structured and stick with it. Don't get sidetracked by all the random YouTube videos and stuff. A lot of that stuff is great, but it often lacks structure. It's like trying to learn a language by just watching random TV shows. You'll pick up some words and phrases, but you're not going to learn the grammar or how to put it all together.
So a structured approach is key. What are the advantages of going with one of these online learning platforms?
Well, first of all, they usually have some kind of system in place, like a step-by-step curriculum, which is really helpful when you're first starting out. And often the instructors on these platforms are actually, vetted. They've been chosen for their teaching skills. Plus, you usually get access to a whole bunch of other resources, like backing tracks to practice with, chord libraries, and sometimes even explanations of music theory.
Chord libraries, backing tracks. Those sound helpful. What are they exactly?
Oh yeah, so chord libraries are basically collections of diagrams that show you how to place your fingers on the fretboard to play different chords. And backing tracks are recordings of other instruments, like drums and bass, so you can play along with them and practice your timing. It's a great way to get a feel for what it's like to play in a band.
That sounds really cool.
Mhm.
So are there any specific online platforms that you would recommend for beginners? Ones that keep coming up in the research?
Yeah, there are a few that are consistently mentioned. Guitar Tricks, for example, they're known for their structured lessons, and their instructors are all very experienced. Justin Guitar is another one, and they're especially good for learning the fundamentals, and a lot of their content is actually free. Jamplay is great if you're looking for something more in depth. They have lessons that focus on specific genres and even specific artists, and their instructors are top notch. And then there's Fender Play. They have a really structured curriculum, and they emphasize learning songs, which is always a good thing. Plus, they have some cool community features. Oh, and they often have a free trial period, so you can check it out before you commit. And one more I wanted to mention, the guitarlesson.com. They have these really cool animated tabs and chord charts, which can be really helpful if you're a visual learner.
Wow, that's a great list to start with. Now, what about YouTube? I mean, it's free and there's tons of guitar lessons on there.
Oh, absolutely. YouTube is a great resource, especially for finding free lessons, and there are some amazing instructors on there. In fact, a lot of the platforms we just mentioned, like Just in Guitar, they also have YouTube channels. And there are other great channels like Andrew Huang, he's really good for music theory, Lauren Bateman for easy chords, and Marty Schwartz for learning popular songs with simple chords. The only thing with YouTube is, it can be a little bit all over the place in terms of structure. It's easy to get distracted, to jump from one video to another without really following a clear path.
I see your point. Sometimes having too many options can actually make things more confusing.
Okay.
Okay, what if someone's more into the traditional way of learning, with a book? Are there any good beginner guitar books out there?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of them that keep coming up are the Guitar Lesson Companion, and it actually comes with a free 5-year online guitar course, which is pretty cool. And then there's Guitar Method Book 1, that's kind of a classic, and it's really well respected.
What about apps? It seems like everything has an app these days.
You're telling me. And yeah, there are some great guitar apps out there. Ultimate Guitar Tabs is a really popular one. It's basically a huge library of chords and tabs for pretty much every song you can imagine. And they even have a beginner guitar course built in. And Udemy, they're known for their online courses, but they also have some structured beginner guitar courses that are worth checking out.
All right, so you've chosen your learning method, you're ready to go. What are the essential first steps in actually playing the guitar? What should a beginner focus on?
Okay, so a few things are really important right off the bat. The first one is learning to read guitar tablature, or tabs, as everyone calls them. It's basically a simpler way of writing music specifically for guitar. You'll find tabs for pretty much any song online, and once you get the hang of it, it's really easy to follow. Think of it like a map that shows you exactly where to put your fingers on the fretboard to play the notes.
Yeah, tabs always look kind of like a secret code to me, but I've heard they're actually easier than traditional sheet music for guitar, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's much more visual. It shows you the strings and the frets, so it's easier to connect what you see on the paper to what you're doing on the guitar. Next, you need to learn some basic chords, and you really want to make sure you learn them well so they sound clean and clear. A lot of the sources we looked at emphasize that with just a handful of chords like C, G, D, Am, and M, you can play thousands of songs. So it's worth spending the time to really get those down.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Just a few chords and you can play all kinds of songs. That's pretty encouraging for a beginner. So what comes after you learn those basic chords?
Well, the next thing is to learn some basic strumming patterns. Strumming is what gives your playing rhythm and energy. Start with simple downstrokes, and once you're comfortable with those, you can start adding in upstrokes. And then, one of the most important things you'll need to work on is changing between chords smoothly. This is something that's going to feel awkward at first, but the more you practice it, the smoother and faster you'll get.
And I imagine the ultimate goal is to start playing actual songs as soon as possible, right?
Absolutely. All the sources we've seen really stress the importance of learning songs from the very beginning. Even if you can only play a simplified version at first, playing music you enjoy is way more fun than just doing exercises. It keeps you motivated. So start with some easy, popular songs that use those basic chords you're learning.
What about learning by ear? Some people seem to be able to pick up songs just by listening to them.
Yeah, that's called ear training, and it's definitely a skill you can develop. But even if you're learning by ear, you still need to start with the basics, like tuning, holding the guitar correctly, fretting notes cleanly, and plucking individual strings. Some good exercises for ear training are playing open strings, fretting single notes on different parts of the neck, trying to sing a melody and then find it on the guitar. You can also experiment with simple harmonies and create rhythmic patterns with just single notes. And if you've played any other instruments before, try to see if you can apply any of that knowledge to the guitar.
So we've got the initial steps covered. Now, what are some tips for staying motivated and actually making progress when you're teaching yourself guitar?
Well, the most important thing is consistency. It's way better to practice for a short time every day than to try to cram in a long practice session once a week. Even just 10 or 15 minutes a day can make a huge difference. Try to create a practice routine, but also make sure you allow yourself time to just play and enjoy the instrument, without any pressure, and be patient. It takes time to learn anything new, and guitar is no exception. Don't compare yourself to other players, just focus on your own journey and celebrate your own progress. And most importantly, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up over mistakes. Learning is a process, and everyone makes mistakes along the way. One of the sources talked about something called the Valley of Disappointment. It's that point where you start to realize that learning guitar is harder than you thought it would be, and your progress might be slower than you hoped. A lot of people hit that point and give up. But if you can just push through that, it gets easier, and you start to see real results.
That's really helpful advice. It's so easy to get discouraged when you're first starting out. Are there any other tips for staying on track?
Yeah, definitely. One thing is to prioritize consistency over intensity, especially when you're just starting out. It's much better to practice a little bit every day than to try to do a marathon session once a week. And don't worry about having a fancy, expensive guitar. A basic guitar that's playable is all you need to start with. You can always upgrade later. And in the beginning, don't get too bogged down in music theory. It's important, but you can learn the basics as you go along. Focus on the physical experience of playing and enjoying the music. Recording yourself playing can also be really helpful. It allows you to listen back and hear what you're doing well and what you need to work on. And don't be afraid to try new things. Learn new chords, scales, explore different styles of music. It's all about keeping things interesting and challenging yourself. Also, remember to warm up your fingers before you start playing. And even though you're learning by yourself, try to find opportunities to play with other people eventually. Jamming with others is a lot of fun, and it can really push you to improve. And finally, set realistic expectations. Learning guitar takes time and effort. Don't expect to become a virtuoso overnight. Just focus on getting a little bit better each day, and you'll be amazed at how much progress you make.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of great tips. What are some common pitfalls that people should try to avoid when they're learning guitar on their own?
Well, we've touched on some of them already, but they're worth repeating. One of the biggest pitfalls is not having a structured learning plan. Jumping around from one resource to another without a clear path is a recipe for frustration. Another one is not learning songs. Make sure you're applying what you're learning to actual music that you enjoy. It makes the process way more fun and rewarding. Also, don't fall for those claims of rapid mastery. There's no shortcut to learning guitar. It takes time and dedication. And as we've said before, consistent practice is essential. Don't be afraid to tackle those challenging lessons like bar chords. They might seem difficult at first, but they're a crucial part of playing guitar. And lastly, something that's so basic but often overlooked, make sure you tune your guitar regularly. Playing an out-of-tune guitar is not only going to sound bad, but it's also going to make it harder to learn.
So to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways for someone who's ready to embark on this journey of learning guitar by themselves?
Okay, so first, get yourself a guitar that you like, that you find inspiring, and that's comfortable to play. Next, choose one structured online learning resource and stick with it. Don't jump around. Practice consistently, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Focus on mastering those basic chords and strumming patterns, and start learning songs right away. Be patient with yourself and don't give up when things get challenging. It's all part of the process.
It really does sound like an achievable goal. And, learning to play an instrument like the guitar, it can bring so much joy to your life. It's creative. It's a great way to relieve stress. And it teaches you discipline.
I completely agree. And the best part is you can start right now. Pick up a guitar, find a lesson that sparks your interest, and just start playing. If you're consistent, even in small doses, you'll start to see real progress. And the feeling of making music, there's nothing quite like it.
And to help you get started, we've put together a collection of resources, all the things we've talked about today. You can find links to online lesson platforms, tuner apps, lists of beginner songs, and all sorts of other helpful stuff. Just visit insert provided link here. We've done the research so you don't have to.
And one last thing to think about. Imagine being able to play one of your favorite songs on the guitar just a few months from now. What will that first song be?
What will it be? That's a great question to think about.